It was a warm Friday afternoon on the corner of Oak Street, just outside Westfield's bustling city center. Officer John Carter had just finished his lunch break and was sitting in his patrol car, sipping the last few drops of his coffee. John was known around the precinct for his abrasive demeanor and a belief that his badge granted him unearned superiority. But today, his arrogance would lead him into a mistake he couldn't undo. Across the street, a black man in a tailored gray suit stepped out of a cafe. His name was Michael Turner. Calm and confident, Michael had an air of quiet authority about him. Though he had grown up in Westfield, he had spent the last decade working in a different city. What no one there knew was that Michael had recently been promoted to captain and would be taking charge of John's precinct the following Monday. However, that was a detail John wouldn't discover until it was far too late. As Michael crossed the street, John's eyes narrowed. He set his coffee cup aside, his gaze fixed on the man. There was nothing remotely suspicious about Michael, but John had his own biases. To him, a black man in an expensive suit walking confidently through his part of town was enough to warrant attention. Without hesitation, John got out of his patrol car, slamming the door with unnecessary force. He marched toward Michael with an exaggerated sense of authority, his hand resting on his belt. "Hey you!" John called out sharply, stepping into Michael's path. "What do you think you're doing here?" His voice carried a biting edge, the kind of tone that made his intentions clear. He wanted to demean. Michael stopped and regarded John with calm yet cautious eyes. "I'm just on my way to a meeting," he replied, his tone respectful but firm. John let out a dry chuckle, his lips curling into a smirk. "A meeting, huh?" he said mockingly, scanning Michael from head to toe. "In that suit? Let me guess, you're some big-shot lawyer or something?" His tone dripped with sarcasm. Michael raised an eyebrow but kept his composure. "I don't see how that's relevant, officer. Is there a problem?" John stepped closer, his posture aggressive. "Oh, there's a problem all right," he said. "You don't belong around here. This isn't some fancy neighborhood you can just stroll through like you own the place." Michael exhaled slowly, his patience beginning to wear thin. "Officer, I'm not sure what you're implying, but I haven't done anything wrong. I'm simply walking to my destination." John snorted. "Yeah, sure. I've heard that one before. You people always have some excuse, don't you?" At that, Michael's jaw tightened, but he refused to rise to the bait. "If you'd like to see my ID, I'd be happy to show it to you," he said, reaching into his jacket slowly to retrieve his wallet. John's eyes narrowed further, and he took a step back, his hand now hovering near his holster. "Slow down," he barked, his voice rising. "I'm not about to let you pull something on me. Keep your hands where I can see them." Michael froze mid-motion, raising his hand slightly to show he meant no harm. "I'm just getting my ID, officer," he said calmly. But John wasn't listening. His face twisted into a scowl and he stepped forward, grabbing Michael roughly by the arm. "You think you can talk to me like that? Like you're better than me?" he growled. Before Michael could respond, John swung his fist, striking him squarely in the face. The force of the blow sent Michael stumbling backward, though he managed to stay on his feet. Gasps erupted from a few onlookers who had witnessed the confrontation, their expressions a mix of shock and disbelief. Michael steadied himself, his hand going to his cheek where John's fist had landed. Slowly, he straightened up, his calm exterior replaced by an unmistakable air of authority. "You just made a serious mistake, officer," Michael said, his voice low and controlled. John sneered, still unaware of who he was dealing with. "Oh yeah? And what mistake is that, pal?" Michael took a step closer, his eyes locked onto John's. "I'm Captain Michael Turner," he said evenly, "the new commanding officer of this precinct." For a moment, John froze. His face went pale, and his confidence drained away like water through a sieve. What did you say?" he stammered, his voice shaking. "You heard me," Michael said, his tone unwavering. "I'm the new captain, and you just assaulted me. That's not just an offense, it's a career-ending move." John's mouth opened, but no words came out. The smug arrogance that had fueled his actions moments earlier had vanished, replaced by sheer panic. Around them, the crowd began to murmur, some shaking their heads in disapproval while others captured the scene on their phones. The weight of what he had done, and the consequences that would follow pressed down on John like a crushing wave. Michael reached into his jacket again, this time producing his official badge and ID. He held it up for John to see. "Does this make things clear?" he asked. "Because let me be even clearer. I'm pressing charges. You're going to answer for this." John was frozen in place, his mind racing to comprehend what had just happened. The man he had punched was his new captain. I didn't know," he stammered, his voice shaky and desperate. "Whether you knew or not doesn't matter," Michael replied, his eyes locked onto John's. "You're a police officer. Your job is to serve and protect, to treat people with respect, but instead you looked at me and saw a criminal because of the color of my skin." John shook his head frantically. No, that's not what I meant." Michael's expression didn't waver. "Your intentions are irrelevant. Your actions tell the real story, and today, your actions showed exactly who you are." Michael reached into his jacket, pulling out his ID, and held it up close to John's face. "Take a good look at this badge, because this badge is going to be the reason your career ends," he said, his voice steady and unwavering. John couldn't speak. The weight of the moment crushed him, and the murmurs of the growing crowd only added to his shame. A few bystanders were recording the incident on their phones, capturing every word and action. Michael calmly took out his own phone and dialed a number without hesitation. Michael dialed a number on his phone and calmly spoke. "Yes, this is Captain Turner. I need a squad car at Oak and Fifth Avenue. Officer John Carter assaulted me. No injuries, but charges will be filed. Please send someone immediately." John stood frozen, the reality of his mistake sinking in. He had just assaulted his new captain, and his career was now on the line. The crowd around them murmured, some recording the incident. Minutes later, sirens approached, and 2 squad cars arrived. Sergeant Ella Parker stepped forward, looking at Michael and then at John. "What happened here, Carter?" she asked. Michael responded, "I'm pressing charges for assault." John tried to explain, "I didn't know he was the captain," but his voice faltered. Parker's expression hardened. "You assaulted a superior officer. Cuff him." The officers moved in to handcuff John, and he didn't resist. As the cuffs clicked around his wrists, the reality of his situation hit him. His career was over. After John was secured, Parker turned to Michael. "We'll take it from here," she said. Michael nodded. "Make sure it's handled by the book." As John was taken away in the squad car, Michael stood still, watching. The crowd dispersed, but the consequences of this moment would echo far beyond this street corner. Michael had taken action, not for revenge, but for justice. John, with his hands handcuffed, was escorted toward the squad car, his eyes filled with despair. He was led slowly, step by step, toward the car. "Come on, get in the car," ordered a police officer. Michael stood outside for a moment longer, his gaze fixed on the car. All of this was ending John's career, but at the same time, Michael had done what was right. This had to be a lesson.